you're all doing well. I am here with a quick little chatty video for you guys today, bringing some hater energy, which was actually kind of requested of me. I want to talk about the books that I DNF'd in 2024 and also my biggest disappointments of the year. I had some questions about this whenever I asked what you guys wanted to see for future videos, and I figured I would deliver. I think 2024 was definitely a year where I became more critical of what I'm reading. I became more okay with putting books aside if I didn't feel like they were working for me, which I'm really happy about because I always talk on this channel about how much, the place that you're in your life can affect how you feel about the books that you read, or the other books that you're reading can affect your thoughts on a book. So I've really embraced the whole DNFing thing more than I have in previous years, and I've said, you know what, it's okay if this isn't the book for me now, because maybe whenever I pick it back up in 6 months, a year, 2 years, maybe it'll work for me. I also feel like I have become a lot more restrained with giving out 5-star ratings to the books that I read. I feel like I am becoming more okay with not liking books, if that makes sense. And I think that I'm better able to talk about the reasons why a book doesn't work for me. And I think that a lot of that has just come along with having this channel and having to verbalize my opinions on books. I think that it has made me think a little bit deeper about what I'm reading and whether or not I'm actually enjoying it. So we'll talk about some books that didn't live up to my expectations here as well. You'll see from the list of books that we're talking about today that I'm a big literary fiction and essay and memoir kind of person. So if that's also your cup of tea, you should definitely subscribe and let me know what the biggest disappointment of the year was for you. I would love to know. And we're gonna get right into it. The first DNF that I want to talk about today is All About Love by Bell Hooks. I know, this is such a widely loved book. I'm very sorry to all of the lovers of this, but whenever I picked this up, I got about 15 pages into it and I knew that it was not jiving with me. Now, I tried to read this in July, and don't get me wrong, I'm not someone that thinks that you need to perfectly align with the experiences that an author is talking about in a book. In fact, I think that you shouldn't. I think that that's the beauty of reading, is getting other people's perspectives and hearing other people's stories. But when I picked this book up, I was really in the mood for something that was just going to deeply connect with me right off the bat. And I was 15 pages in, not feeling that connection. I was worried that maybe I was just too early on in the book and maybe I should push through. But because this is such a praised book, I was like, you know what, we're just gonna hit pause. I didn't want to do this a disservice by forcing myself to read it if I wasn't feeling it. Bell Hooks is an author that is really interesting to me, and I don't know, she was just talking a lot about like family and childhood stuff in here, and that's not really an area that I've had very many issues in, thankfully. So it just was not fully speaking to me, and we'll get to it one day. The next DNF that I have is an essay collection, and that is Of Woman Born: Motherhood as Experience and Institution by Adrienne Rich. I put this down at about 25% of the way through the book. It talks all about motherhood and kind of societal expectations of mothers, which is usually something that I'm really into, but the style of this book was a lot more academic than I was expecting it to be, and it was a lot more academic than I am into. I think the thing that really ended up being more interesting to me about this book than the content itself was the interaction between the time period in which it was written with the content. This book was first published in 1976, and there are a lot of things that kind of come up that definitely feel of that time. But I thought that it was really interesting because there is an introduction that was like written for the 10th anniversary edition by Adrienne Rich, and we see how her line of thinking kind of evolves from 1976 to 1986 whenever she re-released the book. She also added in a bunch of footnotes for that 1986 edition, which we get in here, and I just thought that it was really interesting to see the way that her line of thinking evolved throughout those 10 years. She became more inclusive every time, and I kind of got the feeling that she could have continued to return to this book every 10 years, and it would have just become more expansive and more inclusive. So that was really cool to see. I would love to get back to this at some point, but it kind of gave me similar vibes to On Women by Susan Sontag, which I DNF'd at the end of 2023, where I'm like, I feel like I'm probably better off reading a more contemporary book. It's interesting to kind of see that evolution of feminist thought, but yeah, I just don't know how much I would have gotten out of this if I had continued. My next DNF is actually a book by one of my favorite authors, and that is The Passion According to GH by Clarice Lispector. I got to page 57 in this book back in the spring. I don't know why this book wasn't working for me. I've seen so much praise for it. So many people have said that this is like their favorite Lispector. So I thought that I was going to love it, but it just did not really resonate with me at all. It is about a woman who basically discovers a cockroach in her bedroom and has an existential crisis about it. The writing is really gorgeous in here, as with all Lispectors, but one of the things that I really like about some other books from her, such as An Apprenticeship or The Book of Pleasures or Near to the Wild Heart, those books felt really relatable to me, and I really treasure that, but I did not get that same feeling from The Passion According to GH. I did actually add this onto my winter TBR, so it is one that I would like to get to in the next couple of months here, but yeah, I don't know. I feel like 57 pages in too, it's not that long of a book, but I just, once again, didn't want to push myself through it because I feel like this is a great contender for a book that I will love eventually. My next DNF is a book that I've had on my bookshelf for so long, and that is Weather by Jenny Offill. I did not get very far into this. It is a very fragmented story about a woman. Yeah, I really did not get very far into this to uncover any of the information in the description, but it is kind of just this woman going through life and dealing with kind of the hopelessness of the world, I guess. I think that the fragmentary nature of this book is what kind of threw me off whenever I had picked it up. And I just found that I couldn't really enter into the story the way that I wanted to. It just kind of felt very on the surface for me, and because it was so fragmentary, it felt like there were some things kind of missing for me, which I'm sure it would have all come together, but yeah, just wasn't really feeling it. My next DNF is a very chunky one, and that is Lies and Sorcery by Elsa Morante. Look at this thing. I tried reading this, I want to say back in like February, I think, and I got like 108 pages in and I just couldn't do it. Maybe it is the fear of big books talking, but I just felt very overwhelmed by this. It is a story of like a young girl and her family. It kind of spans across multiple generations and multiple different family members, and Natalia Ginsburg like read the manuscript of this in an entire day and loved it. I think that this was also a really big inspiration to Elena Ferrante, so I thought that it would work for me, but it was just a little bit too much. There, I think, is also kind of like this unreliability to the narrator where some of the stuff that she is saying is kind of made up, and like, I don't know, it was just difficult for me to really sink my teeth into. I don't see myself returning to this anytime soon, but it is a New York Review of Books edition, so I'm definitely gonna hang on to it. But yeah, I don't know when I will be in the headspace to take on something like this. I also DNF'd a very big library book this year, and that is Le Batard by Violette Leduc. This is a French book that is kind of an autobiography of the author. We see her as a young girl coming to terms with her queerness and her family history. I think as far as I got, like, she was in a boarding school and was kind of having some self-discovery moments with the other girls there. But this is another book that is super chunky, and I just did not have time to finish it before my library loan ran out. It was another one where I just felt a little bit overwhelmed by the length of it. It is available on Everand though, which I have a subscription to, so I've been toying around with the idea of picking it back up. It is really highly praised by Simone de Beauvoir, and Deborah Levy actually they both wrote introductions for the edition that I had, and I enjoyed those introductions just a little bit more than I was enjoying the actual reading experience of the book. But I love both of those authors, so I don't know, it's one that I would like to return to eventually. I think reading it digitally might be a little bit better for me as well, just because it is so long. That way I don't have to worry about holding this humongous volume. The book that I kind of want to use to transition from DNFs to disappointment is actually the star of my last vlog of 2024, and that is Drifts by Kate Zambreno. I read this book for the first time a couple years ago, didn't really love it, and decided to pick it up for the reread series that I've been doing on this channel. And I don't know if it was the holiday season that was just kind of taking me out of the reading mood or what it was, but I considered DNFing this and just kind of scrapping the vlog for it. It was not grabbing me, but I did decide to push through with this one just because it was a reread and because I had committed to like doing the vlog for it. I wanted to see the project through. But this was one where my opinion of the book did not really change upon rereading, and I do actually think that I'm going to get rid of this book and sell it to half-price books whenever I make my next trip there. So yeah, this one was kind of one that just fell flat for me. As far as my biggest disappointments of 2024, the first book that I want to talk about is If Only by Vigdis hjorth. This is an early work from this author that was just recently translated into English. I was super excited to receive a copy of it on NetGalley from Verso, so thank you to them, even though I did not like it. This was my first time reading any Vigdis hjorth, and the description of it sounded really intriguing to me. It was kind of giving Annie Ernaux vibes, with this doomed relationship at the center of it, and these themes of like obsession and jealousy. So I was so excited for this, but my god, the repetition in this book was way too much for me to handle, and I probably sound like a broken record at this point because I complain about this book anytime that it comes up. But yeah, this book could have been edited down a bunch, and I think that I would have enjoyed it a lot more. The two main characters have this really toxic affair going where they basically fly to visit each other, have sex, get in a big fight, cry together, go back to their homes, and like call each other on the phone a bunch, rinse and repeat. It was so much of the same thing every single scene, and the stakes here felt really low to me. I didn't really feel like I was rooting for any of the characters, or I couldn't understand the basis of their relationship. I couldn't understand why things were so tortured for them, because we didn't really get to see any sort of connection between the two of them. I feel like the book definitely does a great job of showing how toxic and repetitive these kinds of relationships can be and how difficult it is to get out of that cycle, but I just did not find that it was very compelling. There was no like character development until the last little bit of it, and then by that point it was just too late for me. So yeah, I would really like to read some other Vigdis Hjorth books because I have heard really great things about Is Mother Dead? I know I have Will and Testament on my shelves, so I at least want to give those a try, but this was not the book for me. Another disappointment of the year, which I feel kind of weird calling a disappointment just because of the form of it, but that is As Consciousness is Harnessed to Flesh, Diaries 1964 to 1980 by Susan Sontag. I think I just recently talked about this in my November wrap-up. Is that when I finished this? It is indeed. Oh my gosh, time is not real. I read this book from August to November this year, and it took me so long to push through. I wanted to pick this up because I had read the first volume of Susan Sontag's diaries, which is called Reborn, and I absolutely loved that. I highly recommend that if you're interested in diaries from writers. I think that that one is incredible, but this one was just like, I don't know, the tone was a little bit different. It is a lot more like notes and ideas for her other writing that she's doing and less about her personal life. And I think me being the nosy person that I am, that just didn't work as well for me. I wanted to know about her relationships and what she was going through, and we get a lot of that in Reborn, but not as much here because she's like very established in her career and she's thinking about the work that she's doing. And I haven't read any other Susan Sontag books besides her diaries. I tried to read On Women and DNF'd that, so I've only ever finished her diaries, so I didn't have a lot of the context that I think was needed to understand what she was talking about in these entries. Another disappointment for me was Aurelia by Kathryn. This is a short little memoir dealing a lot with the death of the author's husband, and this book actually has one of my favorite opening lines of all time, so I felt very excited whenever I picked it up and read the first line, which is, "There are points in your life when you think you're about to become whatever's next." And she's kind of talking about being 16 years old and embarking on this journey in her life, and yeah, it just kind of fell flat for me. From that point on, we started really high and it just kind of went downhill. I think that the big issue for me with this book was it is very referential, which I can appreciate in a memoir especially, but I was not familiar with most of the pieces of art or literature or music that she was talking about in here, so it left me feeling a little bit lost. I couldn't really find my footing with it. I just had a lot higher expectations for it, and those were not met with this. Another disappointment for me is another book from a favorite author of mine, that is August Blue by Deborah Levy. I have seen a lot of people pick this up as their first book by her. I think probably because it is her most recent novel, and most of those people that I've seen read this have not enjoyed it. And I was like, it can't be that bad. Like, Deborah Levy's a great author. I don't know why people are not having a good time with this. And then I read it myself and I was like, okay, I see why people are not liking this one. This just felt very watered down to me. I think that the themes that she is exploring as far as like identity and family, those are really interesting and they have so much potential, but the actual storyline in here, it just kind of like slipped through my fingers and it just had no sticking power. This is about a pianist who kind of has a breakdown, stops performing her piano concerts, and starts teaching piano lessons to children. She's kind of haunted by this woman that looks like her doppelganger, and her adoptive father is on his deathbed. So there's a couple of different elements going on here and some questions being asked about family history and the different versions of yourself that you could have become had things gone differently, but she just didn't stick the landing for me. Next, we actually have my very first read of the year, so imagine my disappointment when I pick up my first book of 2024 and I did not like it. That is Year of the Monkey by Patti Smith. I don't know if Patti Smith is an author for me, you guys. I really liked Just Kids whenever I read it back in like, I think the beginning of 2022. I thought M Train was fine, but this one didn't really do it for me. And she was an author that I was kind of just like blind buying her books, and I don't think that I'm gonna do that anymore. This was a very dreamlike account of 2016 in Patti Smith's world. I don't think that I like fever dreamy books. I think that that is something that really bothers me, and this book is very fever dreamy. It almost feels like there's a like time travel element to this book, and I just had a lot of trouble figuring out what was and was not real. She does get into some political stuff in this book, which I really appreciated her perspective, but I would have appreciated it even more if she had been just more straightforward about what she was trying to say. There were just some really like random musings in here that I feel like detracted from There are just some really like random musings in here that I think detracted from what she was trying to do. I did really like the two epilogues that were at the end of this because they were a little bit more rooted in reality. But yeah, overall, I just was not impressed by this, and I think that this is going to be another one that I get rid of and sell to half-price books. So yeah, I don't know, but it does kind of match my shirt today. I have a newer book that I wanted to also discuss, which I've kind of discussed it at length already on the channel, but Didan and Babits by Lili Anolik was a galley that I was so excited to receive from Scribner. I could not wait to dig into it, and I was so disappointed by it, you guys. I think that the relationship between Eve Babits and Joan Didion, there's so much potential for exploration there. You know, they were both writing about California and LA in the 1960s, and they did have this like almost like mentor-mentee relationship with Joan helping Eve get published. But Lili Anolik in this book, talking about both of them, she picks sides, and she is very much on Eve's side, which have your preferences, that's fine, but I think whenever you're writing a nonfiction book that is being marketed as an exploration of both of these women and their relationship, I feel like that bias really takes away from the point that you are trying to make. It just felt so one-sided. I think I said in my review that it should just be called Babits. She only brings Didion into it to kind of tear her down, and it just felt super gossipy, and I don't know, it just rubbed me the wrong way. It's not really the tone that I prefer in my nonfiction. I would have loved a more balanced look at their relationship, friendship, whatever you want to call it. My last disappointment was a book that I read from the library, and I'm really glad that I did not purchase it. That is There But For The by Ali Smith. Oh my gosh, guys, I have read the Seasonal Quartet by Ali Smith, and that one was really hit and miss for me. I liked half of them, didn't really like the other half, and I was like, let me try There But For The, see how I feel about her standalone work. I didn't like it, guys. And I think that it has kind of made me swear off of Ali Smith for a while. I do have a copy of How to Be Both that I have not read, but I've been going back and forth about getting rid of that because I'm just like, I don't think that I get along with the way that she tells stories. The writing in her books is very like playful, and I like that. It kind of almost begs to be read aloud just because of the wordplay and the puns that she uses. So I think that that's really fun. But where she falls flat for me is the actual story itself. I feel very lost whenever I read her novels. And There But For The was, I can't even really tell you what the plot of that book was. There was a man that like locked himself in a bedroom of his like neighbor's house. Were they neighbors? I don't even know. There was a lot of like, I think, British political commentary in it as well, which might contribute to the fact that I didn't really have a great grasp of what was going on. But yeah, I don't think that I'm gonna be reading any more Ali Smith for the foreseeable future. All right, I feel like I'm not very good at being a hater. Like, it's not often that I really like go in on a book. If any of these are your favorite books, I'm sorry. All love to you, but these just did not work for me. I would love to know what books didn't work for you. Feel free to be a hater in the comments. Let me know your thoughts on some disappointments or DNFs that you had, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.